everybody, so this week we are going to make salted caramels because I happen to have some cream left in the house and I'm using up the rest of my sugar before I have to go for a shop again. These are really tasty sweet and they are quite addictive, and I promise you once you make them you will have to stop yourself from making them regularly on a weekly basis. Let's get started and let's see what we can do. Ingredients you are going to need for salted caramels include 380 ml of double cream, 400 grams of granulated sugar, 240 ml or about half a tin of golden syrup, 55 grams of unsalted butter, the recipe does call for a vanilla pod, but I find them really expensive, so I tend to buy vanilla bean paste for this, and I usually use about a teaspoon for this recipe, and about 15 grams of sea salt flakes. The Maldon ones are pretty much the best. Equipment: you're going to need trusty pan, wooden spoon, measuring jug to measure out your cream, weighing scales, your sugar thermometer, and a pastry brush for tapping down the edges so that you get a nice smooth caramel at the end. Don't forget to line a tin with some greaseproof paper to pour your mixture into afterwards. You can do it without the greaseproof paper, but you need to properly grease up the tin because it just makes it easier to get it out later on. To make caramels, you put pretty much everything straight into the pan. So I've already put in the 400 grams of sugar, 380 ml of cream, 55 grams of butter, half teaspoon of vanilla bean paste, or you could put your vanilla pod if you've got some in the house. Don't go out and buy it especially though. The flavour doesn't make that much of a difference and you're paying so much more just by buying a vanilla pod rather than just getting the paste. And I'm just finishing off pouring the golden syrup into the pan. Once I finish that, I'm going to put about 7 grams of the salted flakes in with it, and then I'm going to put it on low and start melting that sugar. So as with the other recipes that I've done, I'm just going to give it a brief stir at the start to try and combine all those elements, and to make sure that the sugar doesn't catch on the bottom of the pan. Doing this the whole time on a low heat so that we don't burn the sugar. And then once it's all merged together and everything's melted, I'm going to turn the heat up, and we're aiming for about 121 degrees today because we're making the caramel. That's the firm ball stage. So firm ball runs from about 118 degrees to 121 degrees. 121 is the highest amount. Anything over than that and you're getting into the hard ball stage and it becomes quite tough toffee then, as opposed to just a soft caramel. So it very much depends on what the texture you like in your sweet. If you like it to be quite chewy and soft, you're aiming for that 118 to 121 degree. If you want it to be a bit tougher, a bit more toffee like, you know, so you've got to really pull your jaws apart to eat it, kind of like treacle toffee texture, you'd be aiming at about 122 to 130 degrees. So that's the difference between those two stages. But I'm going for a real soft caramel here because I don't really want it getting stuck in my teeth. Sometimes it's a bit easier to put the butter in smaller amounts, so I'm just breaking it up because it'll melt quicker and combine a little bit easier. As you can see, it's already taken on that kind of buttery look, and we've not even begun to melt the sugar yet. As you can see, the sugar is pretty much all melted now. I think I've got all of it. All the butter is melted into it. And if you watched the butterscotch video, which I think was the first one that I posted, it's a very similar process to this, but obviously we're creating a completely different flavour. As you've melted everything, turn your heat up. And as I said before, we're going to be bringing this to about 121 degrees. But it is very much your taste on this. It's how chewy you like your sweets. So the first time you do it, go for the 121 and then kind of experiment a little to see what kind of chewiness you like. Some of the ladies in my class have gone up to about 125 because they think that it holds better and it has that more of a chew to it. It is genuinely your own preference on this one between that whole firm ball and hard ball stages. Feel free to look it up and just decide for yourself which one that you think would be best. As I've started to boil this up, I'm going to do my little trick to kind of keep it as smooth as possible. So if you haven't seen it before, you need to get your pastry brush. I have a silicone one because it's just better for working with sugar. You can use a standard one though, I'd used that before I started buying bits. Dip it in some cold water and then go around the edges, and all this excess granular sugar that hasn't quite melted, water it down so it falls into your syrup, work around the whole way, and then as the syrup expands with the heat, you won't end up with little grainy bits in there because they would have melted along with everything else. At this point you're going to put your thermometer in and you can see it's bubbling merrily away. I think we're looking for kind of a brown, much like an envelope, you know, kind of ones that you get official paperwork in. That's the kind of brown you're looking for. And I've still got it on like a medium to high heat because we have got butter and cream in this, so I don't want to risk any kind of burn. But you can see how the colour is turning and we're at about 107 degrees. If you don't have a sugar thermometer, you can go off by the drop test, which I'll show in a different video because I'm not a big fan of it. But if you can get hold of a thermometer, you can usually pick one up for about £4 or £5 off online retailers, and they are well worth it. Just make sure it is a sweet thermometer, so that, because if you just get a standard one, it might not go up to the degrees that you need. In all of my classes, I always tell people to be very patient when they're making sweets, simply because it will go very, very slowly. Once you've put all your ingredients together and you've done all your preparation, make sure you weigh everything out first before you even turn the cooker on. And then once you actually begin with the melting of the sugar and the bringing it to temperature, it can be quite a slow process, so you do require a great deal of patience. And the reason why is because as it heats, obviously there'll be bursts of energy, so sometimes it'll jump up 3 or 4 degrees, and that's usually when new sweet makers get caught out, as you're not expecting it to jump up. You take your attention off for a second and the next thing you know, you've burnt your sugar. You are working with a material that is really, really hot. It can burn you quite badly, so you have to make sure that your attention is on this. So don't even attempt sweet making if you've got other things going on in the kitchen, or at least not until you've been doing this a fair while and you've got a rough idea of how long different temperatures take to get there. So right now I'm up to about 119 degrees, which is kind of the most basic caramel you can do. You could take it off the heat right now and it'd be really runny, but it wouldn't hold its form very well, so you'd get that kind of I don't know, gloopy caramel texture, I suppose, kind of like what you get in a Mars bar, I think is the best way to describe it. But obviously, unless you're going to put it in some chocolate or formulate it around something else, it's going to be a nightmare to try and eat. So I'm going to leave it for another couple of degrees. Like I said, 121 is what we're aiming for today, but you can go up, if you want it a little bit firmer, up into the hardball section, which basically means 130 is your maximum. But you can see the colour change on there, it's like a yellowy brown. It's not great in this light, I'm afraid, but you get the general idea. Once you've reached the ideal heat that you're aiming for, turn the heat off immediately. If it's on an electric hob, take it off the heat source underneath it, because you just want the cooking to stop immediately. I'm now going to pour this into my prepared tin, and then I'm going to pop out any bubbles on the top. So if you have a look on this, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but mine's actually quite smooth. Sometimes you'll have more bubbles in it and you just have to get a sharp knife and pop them, and just make sure you don't have any that separates out your toffee. Then you're going to sprinkle on the remainder of your salt, so it'll be about 7 grams, and just put it evenly across the top of your caramel, like this. Don't put too much because obviously there's salt in there, and it's just for the look and the effect of it. Then I'm going to leave that set for a couple of hours or overnight. Overnight is best. And then we're going to cut it. And there we have it. Super simple, sexy, salted caramels. I absolutely love them. And they are really, really easy to make. And I'd highly recommend giving them a go. One thing I would say is, if you're cooking with anything with sugar, when you're washing up, it does stick to your pan quite badly. I found if you just put it straight in the sink with a load of boiling hot water and leave it for 10 minutes, all that sugar comes off really, really quickly, and it saves you having to scrub for hours. I hope you enjoyed the video this week. I had a lot of fun making it, and I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of fun eating it. I hope that you end up doing the same. Keep safe, everybody, and I will see you next week.